All right, hi everyone. Welcome to the next session here. So this is going to be building blocks of security using passkeys to protect user access. And we have Carly and Jacob from Attentive here. I'm going to hand it over to them. We're going to do questions at the mic at the end. You can also submit them online, and we will take them at the end of the session. Over to you guys.
Awesome. Whoa. Hi, my name is Carly Score. I lead the security engineering teams at Attentive, and here with me today is Jacob Rickerd, a principal cloud security engineer. And we're going to talk you through our experiences and different ways we've implemented FIDO2 authentication. Just a quick plug for those of you who don't know what Attentive is. We're an AI-powered SMS and email marketing company and platform that we provide. So over the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to share with you our FIDO2 journey and the different ways we've implemented FIDO2, why we did it, and the lessons that we've learned along the way. Our journey includes 3 different implementations, all surrounded or focused on how we can improve the security of our employees and their access. We did 3 different rollouts over the past 2 years, and our first one included an Okta IDP workforce enforcement requiring FIDO2 to access our core applications. The second being a rollout around a FIDO2 reauthentication challenge we implemented for the way that our employees go to access our customer accounts. And then the third one being a FIDO2 authentication challenge anytime someone needs critical access to our infrastructure, think AWS or just-in-time temporary privileges, adding in a FIDO2 check there as well. All right, so just to give you a little bit of the lay of the land before we dive into everything, our employees all use Okta, our identity provider, to access almost all of our applications, and you can see a couple of those examples there on the right. And now you'll see some of the applications that we're going to focus the remainder of this talk on. Okay, so why don't we get into the details? The first thing we're going to do is talk through the implementation through Okta. I think we all know phishing attacks are becoming a lot more sophisticated, and there's a higher likelihood of success of an internal account compromise. Users continue to be a main target for these types of attacks. And if you go back to 2022, I think a lot of us are familiar with what was called the octopus attack, where the attacker simulated the Okta login page for various companies, phished their employees, and then those employees landed in a Okta page that looked like what they would normally log into, but it wasn't actually their main login page. And that attack harvested the username and password of those credentials and then grabbed the TOTP to essentially compromise that account. Now, TOTP is great. They had MFA in place, but this is an example of an attack where TOTP just wasn't enough to protect the users and their employees, whereas a FIDO2 authenticator would have been able to prevent this type of attack from being successful because of how it actually ties to the device. Now, a lot of companies were interested in this, and FIDO gained a lot of traction after these types of attacks, and a lot of companies started to take action, and something that really stood out to us is the folks that were, or companies that were targeted by this octopus attack were actually key competitors of Attentive, and that is what begins our FIDO2 journey at Attentive. We needed to reduce the likelihood of one of our employees and their accounts being compromised. To do this, we leveraged Okta and the authentication policies that Okta provides to require a FIDO2 authentication into most of our critical applications, whether that be using a biometric authenticator like Touch ID or a YubiKey. And I say most applications because one of the things we did with our rollout for our enterprise is we actually didn't require it upon your initial Okta login. When we did this adoption project, we actually required it at the application layer so that, great, you logged into Okta, but then you go to access a downstream application, and now you are required to have that FIDO2 authenticator. Big piece there was not locking people out of their accounts, because that's something we did not want to be in the business of, or stop people there. Now, did that go? There we go. Okay. For those of you who have implemented security controls before, one of the hardest parts of implementing new security controls is change control, especially when you're changing the behavior of how large amounts of people operate, their workflows, what they're expected to do. That creates additional challenges in and of itself. And what you're going to see on the screen right now is some of the actual screenshots from the rollout we did and the adoption we did to create that engagement, to monitor enrollment with FIDO2, and the actual usage. So on the bottom left, you'll see me actually presenting at our company town hall, where we talked through the attack, the octopus attack that I had mentioned previously. We showed them how to enroll. We actually took time and watched those usage metrics go up as an organization and get people to enroll live. And then on the top left, you'll see a dashboard. This is a way that we created engagements upon our different department leaders. So a department could go in, or a leader of a team could go in and be like, okay, how is my department doing? Are we going up in our enrollment and our adoption of this? Or create some gamify it a bit, look at specific individuals to say, did my team enroll? And it just created more awareness of what the current status was. And then just beyond that, you'll see, different screenshots of me posting in Slack to create engagement. We did newsletter announcements, we did FAQs and how-to documents, all with the goal of creating engagement, awareness, educating employees, and also creating some healthy competition amongst the org. All of this to say is the end result was within 4 weeks, we were able to enroll and actually enforce all of our employees to require a FIDO2 authentication before accessing any of our key applications. This was a huge win for our company to be able to do this quickly and across over 1,000+ people. And some of the things that made it easier was, one, the Okta authentication policies, being able to do that phased approach at an application level really helped us as an organization. Plus, we are mostly a Mac-based shop, which allowed us to have Touch ID or biometric authentication on all of our devices, which really helped us speed up the implementation timeline. Outside of this, we did a lot of things around how-to documents, FAQs, making sure our employees had the resources they needed to understand what FIDO2 was and why they needed to do this, and account for the different use cases that came up. Same goes for our IT teams. They really needed to understand and expect different questions from the organization, and we didn't want people to be reactive. We wanted to be proactive, and having those resources was really important. So, just some things to consider, and things that stand out is having multiple options to enroll was key. Making it really easy for them to enroll was also key. Building it into their workflows to actually enforce this. Thinking about exception processes was also important for us. Things happen, devices break, but business doesn't stop just because you can't access your laptop, or your Touch ID broke, or your UB key got lost, something like that. So having those different processes in place for certain applications or certain devices and scenarios was important. And then the third one being shared and service accounts. When we announced this, people were like, are my processes going to break? Is my automation going to break? And we had accounted for all of that in our rollout, which gave comfort to folks, first off, and also made sure things didn't go south. All to say, this was an extremely successful rollout, really easy to follow. End users love it. It's just so much smoother and part of their daily process than using something like a TOTP. And within 4 weeks, we had everybody fully enrolled and required to use FIDO2, which was both a win from a security standpoint, while also creating that usability and end user experience being extremely positive. Now, I highlight the Okta IDP enforcement across our workforce. I don't know, it's not anything unique or groundbreaking, should I say, but the success of that was super important for the like subsequent FIDO2 rollouts that we were gonna do. Because if that failed, then trying to create engagement and create a positive experience around subsequent rollouts was not going to be successful, and that made all of our employees really open to future rollouts, which I'm gonna talk about more with our second FIDO2 authentication process, journey, whatever, which was around securing employee access into our customer accounts. Okay, so as part of the next implementation, we were looking to protect employees and the access they had into customer accounts. Our CSMs often need to access our customer accounts to do business. It's something that our customers really value, is our CS teams being almost like an extension of the marketing teams of our customers. And that's a value add that our business provides and something that we couldn't really get in the way of. All to say, that also meant that all of our CSMs had full access to all of our customer accounts. And as you could imagine, from a security point of view, we did not love that. We weren't comfortable with that risk, even though that those, access into the application had FIDO2 up front and upon initial login, we still weren't comfortable with the fact that, with the amount of access that our CSMs had into customer accounts. So we tried to put our heads together to come up with, how do we reduce the blast radius if an account is compromised? How do we make sure the number of customer accounts is reduced and that impact is smaller? We talked to our CS teams, our engineering teams, and looked at traditional methods like, RBAC, for example, is a very traditional way. It was too high of a level of effort. The impact to our user base and just the way we operate wasn't gonna work. And it ended up being extremely just disruptive. So we put our heads together to come up with a new solution, which is using a reauthentication challenge with FIDO2. So anytime an employee tries to go access a customer account, because they actually do need this access, and there is not a lot of consistency in the access that they have into customer accounts and why, they were able to now require a FIDO2 authentication challenge. So you go to switch and go to say, hey, I'm gonna go access this customer. Well, no, you don't have access until you verify you are who you say you are. This created, one, a really easy experience for our CS teams because it was built into their workflows, didn't create any sort of disruption for them, and also significantly reduced the blast radius and impact from a security standpoint if one of those accounts were compromised. This put the FIDO2 authentication not just at the initial application layer, but it also put FIDO2 at the action or account layer, adding that additional layer of security and giving us the ability to reduce that risk without being disruptive to the organization and the way we operate and the value that we provide to our customers. All to say, I'm gonna let Jacob take it over from here, and he's gonna walk you through exactly what that customer reauthentication flow looks like in a little bit more detail and share some of the learnings from that implementation.
Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Jacob Rickerd. I'm a principal security engineer at Attentive, and I'm gonna walk through the flow that Carly just talked about. So if I'm a CSM and I want to access one of our customer accounts because I just got a ticket and I need to take some action, I'm going to start by going to Okta, like I would to access any application, and select the Attentive UI chiclet. From here, it's going to prompt them for their first FIDO2-based auth, which on success, they're going to be able to access our UI. Then they're going to start the flow to switch into a customer account, and then here a system check is going to happen. It's going to ask, hey, have they accessed this customer account in the last 12 hours? If they have, everything's good and they can access it. But if they haven't, it is going to prompt them for a FIDO2-based auth. Here, if they complete it, we record that, and then they're able to access that account for the next 12 hours. But if that fails, access is denied. Then later that day, if they get another ticket to access a different customer account, and they haven't accessed it in the last 12 hours, then this process repeats. This is what this looks like from the CSM's perspective. Nothing too crazy, just your standard FIDO2 prompt page with Chrome prompting for Touch ID. But this was massively successful in reducing the blast radius if one of our CSM sessions was stolen or compromised. This resulted in a 98% reduction in the amount of accounts that a CSM has access to at any given time. And that's because some stuff that made this easier was the fact that we already rolled out FIDO2 to the entire company in the process that Carly talked about earlier. Additionally, they already had to use a passkey in order to log into the system when getting into the UI, so it wasn't too much of a stretch to just do a reauth for the sensitive action. Some stuff that made this a bit harder, though, is we decided to kind of roll our own backend for the FIDO2 auth. Now, nobody freak out. We still use official UBCO, WebAuthn libraries and stuff like that. But it was a more limited implementation. And that meant that users could only enroll one authenticator, and it was different from the one that they had in Okta. And we had to create the process around managing and resetting those if there was an issue. Some things to consider if you're going to do something similar. We had some users get kind of tripped up if they use a password manager that supported passkeys, and they went to enroll for the first time and enrolled their password manager's passkey, and then they come back to this later and then go to log in, and then they try to use their device-bound one, and not understanding what happened, kind of get tripped up and needing support, which happened a couple times. Additionally, you got to decide what type of authenticators you want to allow, if you're cool with synced credentials or not. And generally, just the process around managing our own backend for this is where some of the challenges lied. But it was honestly all small potatoes at the end of the day. And it only took 1 week after we implemented this to enroll hundreds of CSMs in the process and enforce it for accessing customer accounts. So we consider this a great success. And then we decided to turn our attention for critical infrastructure access at Attentive and how we could bring our FIDO2 learnings to this process. So at Attentive, for years, we've had a process that if an engineer needs to access critical infrastructure in AWS, they're going to start by going to Slack and selecting our escalation bot, filling out a form with the role that they want access to, the duration that they want the access, and giving us a little reason. They'll then hit submit, and this will send off a request to the manager, where then they will review and approve, and the engineer will be able to access that role for the duration that they selected. Now, this worked great, but when the security team picked up a project to reevaluate the way that humans access AWS and the roles that they use, we turned our attention to this bot, and we were asking ourselves, like, hey, why are managers even involved in this process at all? We did some discovery, and we found 2 main reasons. The first is managers were supposed to spot check the users that were stepping up to make sure that nothing fishy was going on, Like, did they have a valid business reason? Does the request make sense? Is this an attacker impersonating the user? All this stuff, but when we looked at the data, we saw managers were approving 99+% of requests. And they trust their engineers, as they should. And it is unreasonable to ask managers to be our defense against these compromised accounts. The second reason we discovered why managers were involved in this process was something compliance. But when we actually talked to the people that manage compliance at Attentive, we found that there was no hard or strict requirement that managers needed to be involved in our step-up escalation processes. So with that, we decided to replace the manager approval part of our escalations with a just-in-time FIDO2-based auth, where the user, we've shortened the length of time that they get access to the roles, but also reduced the friction that it takes in order to get access to them. And implementing FIDO2 meant that we had high confidence that the user that was taking the action is who they say they are. This is what the flow looks like from an engineer's perspective, where it's pretty simple. They'll go to Slack, they'll fill out a little form, they then get a message that prompts them to do a FIDO2-based auth, which this time will take them to Okta, where they will complete that, and then they're put in the Okta group for X period of time, and then they can access their new roles for that duration. Here's some screenshots of what they actually see with the form on the left that they'll fill out, the message that they get with those details and prompting them to do the auth, and then the actual Okta authentication screen on the right. Now, you're sensing a theme here. This was also a huge success for us and resulted in a 96% reduction in the amount of time that engineers have access to critical production resources. We found before that engineers would escalate for the entire week that they were on call, just in case something happened. And even if they weren't on call and were escalating, they'd still request for longer than they needed because they didn't want to bug their managers. But by making this a lot easier and us getting high confidence from a FIDO2 auth that the user is who they say they are, we managed to make this a lot more self-service and easier for folks. We also eliminated, on average, 200 manager approvals per month as part of this, and that is 200 less times that engineers are stuck waiting on their managers to approve their access, and 200 less times that managers have to context switch out of what they're doing in order to approve these requests. And the whole thing only took 2 days of engineering time to implement. And that's because some stuff that made this process easier was the fact that this time we leveraged users' existing Okta-enrolled FIDO2 authenticators. So there wasn't a separate enrollment step, and we didn't need to manage another backend for this. Additionally, we already had an escalation bot in place that we only needed to modify, so the change was a lot simpler. And managers, engineering, and security all wanted this change, which really helped. Some stuff that made this a bit harder, though, was the Okta to AWS SCIM integration. It takes just a little longer than we'd like. When you're put in the group, you have to count to about 10 or 15 in your head, and then sign out and sign into AWS before you can access the roles. And that's not really too much time, but it's just long enough to be annoying for most engineers. And the just-in-time concept was newer for a lot of folks. Some things I consider if I was doing this again, or if anyone else was going to implement this, was make sure that this meets your compliance requirements. Everyone's got different compliance requirement needs, and we were okay with this, but yours may be different. The escalation bot now becomes a critical service for engineers. So if it's 3 in the morning and they need to escalate to their role, and it's not working, all of a sudden it's 3 in the morning and now you're going to get paged for their incident, and you better be able to fix it, or else it's 3 in the morning, you've got to page like an Okta admin to go add them into the role. Highly recommend focusing on reliability for a service like that. And finally, make sure engineers practice this so the first time that they engage with it isn't during a high pressure incident. Once again, that was all small in the grand scheme of things, and we've heard from both managers and engineers that they love this process and want us to bring it to more places. And speaking of which, that is why I'm going to end on what's next for Attentive. We consider us at the very beginning of our FIDO2 journey. The places we've already implemented, we've seen great success, and we want to continue to expand upon that success to bring this to more places and more things. The first is more systems, so we protect our critical applications behind FIDO2 and Okta, but we are considering expanding that scope to more applications that people access. The second is more actions that they take. We already protected the CSM account switching flow, but there's other critical actions that CSMs take that we could require another step up for. And hey, if anyone's watching on the recording in the future, no, don't quote me on this, but we could also consider bringing this to the customer side of the house as well to allow customers to log into their accounts with passkeys and protect some of their critical actions with step-up auths. And finally, more escalations. Like I said, engineers and managers have loved the FIDO2 change that we made to the AWS escalation process, but there are other escalation processes where managers are still involved today that we think we can get them out of the process and make it both more secure and more user-friendly. So thank you all for taking the time to listen to us chat about FIDO2, and we're happy to answer any questions.
We probably have time for 2 questions, and I have one online, so if anyone in the room wants to come to the mic, go ahead and queue up. Is the 12-hour access limit on FIDO2 authentication an internal requirement or based on a different criteria?
Yeah, it's an internal requirement to balance the security side of things and the usability side of things from a CSM perspective. So that's how that threshold was set, and 12 hours is about a working day.
Good.
All right, thank you for the presentation. Quick question. So I heard there was a point where segregation of duties for the CSM managers was in place. I just wanted some details around that. How was that, and what is the exact segregation of duty policy added?
In terms of the customer account switching?
Right.
So we add the FIDO2 as a self-verification to a degree to say you are who you really are in terms of accessing those customer accounts. And we don't have a ton of consistency into like, these people access only these customer accounts. So the reauthentication flow really just adds that like self-authorization saying you are the person you say you are, you're tied to your device, we know that, and it gives that reassurance to prevent manual error and just help give us a higher level of confidence in terms of that blast radius.
Yeah, any CSM may need to access any customer account as part of their duties.
All right, well, thank you, Carly and Jacob, for the presentation. And we have about a 5-minute break before the next session.
Thank you.